Hello and welcome to another episode of Rico'S Rants. I'm your host, Rico DiGiorgio. First off, yes, I am wearing sunglasses. I am battling a headache, and in order to make these videos work well enough, especially in a dark lit room, I have to have a lamp sort of shine directly at me to get some light. Otherwise, it looks, if I raise it, you can just see it's already starting to get dimmer. So this, unfortunately, is how I have to do it, but the light right in my eyes is just bothering me. Tonight, I'm going to do a review of a movie that I remember watching many times as a kid, and it just stuck with me. It was a dark film, but it was very funny. It was adventure, full of adventure, and it was also sort of my first forte into like British, weird type Monty Python type films. And I also kind of called it an unofficial Monty Python film. Oh, and I'm trying this for the first time on camera. I'm curious. I'm always a big fan of Arizona, but let's give it a shot. Honestly, that's no different than just apple juice. Kind of a letdown. Okay, so the film is Time Bandits. And if you haven't seen it, please go see it. It's an amazing film. Very different, cerebral type film. And I call it an unofficial Monty Python film because the majority of the writing staff and the cast are part of the Monty Python troupe. So you got Michael Palin. It's written by Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin, and Terry Gilliam is the director officially. Terry Gilliam is the American member of the Monty Python, and he sort of just became British by association. I think he actually got British citizenship. He converted to a British guy. So. First off, the story is about a little boy who is neglected by his family, his parents, and they're very much into material things. They are always looking at the next latest dishwasher or the next latest blender, and they're always getting the next thing. And they're always watching a terrible, cheesy, shallow TV show and always laughing and watching it. And always yelling at this poor kid, Kevin. I think the actor who played the kid was a kid. I think his name was Craig Warnock. As far as I know, I haven't seen him in anything else since then. He's very much interested in fantasy and adventure. He's always got books and pictures in his rooms of knights and armor and stuff like that. So one night, there are these dwarves, and they're sort of like dressed up in medieval type garb, but also like it looks like they have different types of clothing from different periods of time. And they sort of sneak into his room. He catches them, and they more or less take this kid hostage. So at first it's sort of like, we're going to kidnap you, and then a giant floating, filled with light head, and it's semi-animated, or it is animated because it's Terry Gilliam. He was the animator of Monty Python. Is sort of chasing after them, and this is when it gets all weird. The room stretches out, and it's like a long tunnel, and they are pushing on the wall, and it just becomes they literally, in a weird way, break the fourth wall without actually like look at the camera and breaking the fourth wall. They break the fourth wall. And the head is repeating, "Return what you have stolen from me," and he's just coming at them. When they push the wall away, it reveals this vacuum, essentially as space and time. And they drop down and fall, and all of a sudden they're in Napoleonic France. And the kid realizes that he's traveled through time with these dwarves. And the dwarves, as we find out, the dwarves they used to work for God, but they call it in the movie the Supreme Being. And they used to work for him, and while God was doing all the big things, mountains and clouds and stuff like that, they were in charge of making little things. And not really, they were unhappy that they weren't getting a whole lot of credit. And so they had this map which showed all the not plot holes, all the wormholes, essentially, black holes, through space and time. So they can go to specific parts in time, and they're using this to go and rob from historical famous people like Napoleon. So, hence the title, Time Bandits. And the whole film is more or less about them going through different time periods and unsuccessfully, and sometimes successfully, robbing, sorry, my cat's going crazy, robbing these people. Like they at one point in the beginning of the film, they meet up with Napoleon, who's played by Ian Holm, and he is very insecure about being short, and he's always like, he knows how tall famous people are. He compares himself to Alexander the Great, who was like 5'2", and he is a very much a tyrant. And at one point, in order for the dwarves and Kevin to con Napoleon, they get him drunk and they entertain him by going on stage and singing "Me and My Shadow," which of course is, not written for another 200 years, essentially. And then they start fighting because they're, not cooperating well with the song and dance. Napoleon finds it hysterical that he loves little things hitting each other, and that's a recurring thing in this scene. He loves all these guys. He gets drunk and passes out, and they rob his ass blind. And then they escape, and then it's all about them going to different places. Like at one point, they wind up on the Titanic, not really thinking. Like you could tell these guys like have not done their homework really well, because they're on a Titanic and they're enjoying it, and then of course the Titanic fucking hits the iceberg, and they're just like, well, what do we do now? So on top of all this, of course there's a villain, and it's not the giant floaty head. That's the Supreme Being. That's God just saying, give me back the map that you stole from me. But there's the darker villain, and he's just known as Evil. And he's played brilliantly by David Warner. David Warner is more or less a long-forgotten British actor. I think he's still alive. This was a guy who, back in the 70s and 80s, was making... He was another Malcolm McDowell. He was another villainous British actor. And he was so known for it that he was actually the original choice for Freddy Krueger. Like, he came in and screen tested and talked to them, and they did some artwork and sculptures and stuff looking like what Freddy Krueger would look like with his face. Granted, Robert Englund killed as Freddy Krueger, but I would have loved to have seen David Warner. And as a weird throwback, Wes Craven put David Warner in Scream 2. So it was almost like, hey, you weren't Freddy, but I'll put you in this movie. He played the drama teacher in Scream 2. So David Warner is deliciously evil and deliciously pompous and very proper. And like if this was remade now and Alan Rickman was still alive, Alan Rickman would fucking play him. Or Jeremy Irons, one of those silky smooth, aristocratic type voice and proper British actors playing the bad guy. Like, you're terrified of them, but you're also captivated by them because they just have that voice and they have that elegance. And David Warner, his whole costume is based a lot on the guy who designed the alien in Alien, the Xenomorph. Like, so very much he's got a weird helmet headpiece with it looks like he's got claws that are gripping his helmet, and that's just the design, and that's very much based on the artwork of the artist. Creepy dude, and he's got little minions running around. They're all stupid, and they're all, they're just buffoons, and he kills them by just shining his hand at them, and bolt of thunder and lightning comes out of them, and they explode. Not they wouldn't disappear. They just giant explosion. So a lot of the humor comes from their hijinks going through these time periods. At one point, they visit Robin Hood, and in a twist of fate, Robin Hood robs them. And they're just like, oh wow, and it's played by John Cleese. And one of the rare times you see John Cleese without any form of facial hair. So at first you're like, oh shit. And he is hamming it up, and he is just like, he's like, oh man, you guys got a great haul. He's looking at their Napoleon treasure. He's like, this is really good, and he says, thank you very much. And they're all like, oh yeah, you're welcome. And then, wait, what? What do you mean thank you? He's like, well, this is going to help the poor out. He's like, the poor? He's like, yeah, the people, lovely people. And they give their treasure to the poor without even intending to. So, who else is in it? Sean Connery is in this, and Sean Connery wasn't intended to be in this, but the way that the screenwriters wrote it, there was a character that is supposed to look exactly like Sean Connery. That's how they described it, like a guy who looks just like Sean Connery. And Sean Connery got the script. He's like, well, I look like Sean Connery, so let's make it happen. And Sean Connery plays two roles in it. I'll spoil one. He plays King Agamemnon. So at one point, Kevin gets separated from the dwarves and is basically hanging out in, early Greece and hanging out with King Agamemnon. And Sean Connery plays him and more or less adopts him, and then the dwarves kidnap him back, essentially. So it does have historical basis, but it also has a lot of fantasy basis as well. Because at one point, Agamemnon, when you first meet Agamemnon, it's a hard word to say, he's fighting a Minotaur, a giant man, and then a head of a bull. And so there's got the fantasy elements of that. At one point, there's an ogre, and he has a very pompous, normal British wife, and that's just great. That's just pure Monty Python type thing, where they have an ogre-looking man with horns and fangs, and he's got this cute little British woman, as his wife, and she's like, oh, I love you so much, and just almost like a Scottish accent, probably Scottish. And at one point, there's a giant. I mean, so it's when I'm at work and people are like, hey, do you have Monty Python the Holy Grail, or do you have Life of Brian? And 9 times out of 10, it's usually a parent wanting to introduce Monty Python to their kids. And I'll look at the kid and I'll be like, you may be too young for the meaning of life. And I'll say that to the parent. I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, it's your call, but I would, you don't want to fail by introducing Monty Python to a kid who's not ready for it and who can't appreciate it. Like how I did another video where I was talking about the Goonies. Some kids are not ready for Indiana Jones when they're too young. It can be scary. It can be, especially when he's talking about history and shit like that, it just goes over their head. So you give them the Goonies as a starter. I recommend Time Bandits for people who have not seen Monty Python yet, because if you just showed Holy Grail or Meaning of Life or Life of Brian or the show itself to a kid who's never seen it and is too young and can't embrace the weirdness and everything, stop it, Kev. They're going to get bored. They're not going to like it. So Time Bandits is more or less made for kids. I mean, it has a kid protagonist. A lot of the film is shot from from the eye level of a kid, as well as dwarves, and the dwarves are great. You could almost say that they are the inspiration for the 7 dwarfs, because each one is different. there's not a happy, there's not a sleepy, there's not a grumpy or dopey, but they all are different in one way. And one of the well-known dwarves in the film, and who's known as the nice one, is played by Kenny Baker, who died, I think, 6 months ago. If you don't know who Kenny Baker is, he's R2-D2. So R2-D2, if you ever want to see what R2-D2 looks like acting without, is running around with these other guys, and they're all friends. And one other dwarf in particular, I think he played one of the Ewoks, and so, like, I think they all may have played the Ewoks at some point. So the cast, Shelley Duvall's in it, Michael Palin is in it, John Cleese is in it, Ian Holm, David Warner, Sean Connery, and that's more or less the cast. I mean, it doesn't, like, they don't go too far. They're not always, like, trying to throw in the next celebrity cameo. It's not really that. It's just that they happen to get famous actors in these films. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to show up and here's, you know, Richard III played by Rowan Atkinson or something like that. So it's very much a non-cameo type movie. It just happens to have actors that are more well-known for a small-time movie that you would imagine. Random part of the staff, George Harrison supplies the music. Like, he wrote a couple songs for it. There's a song that he wrote during the closing credits. It's strong, man. It's not green apple flavor, which I don't like, but it's really like kind of sour. It's not sweet apple, it's sour apple. So yeah, I remember watching this movie. The first time I saw this movie, I was sick, which is not uncommon for me. But I had a flu or something, or I had a migraine. I was at my dad's girlfriend at the time, at her house, and she popped this on. And at first, I didn't want to watch it because I was freaked out, because she was like telling me there's a giant in it. And the poster, which I don't have, shows a giant head in the ocean or some body of water, and a ship on top of his head. And he rises out, and the ship is still on his head, and he sort of uses it as a hat. For a while, she tried to get me to watch it. I couldn't. I was, for some reason, I was kind of freaked out by the idea of that. And then eventually, she just put it on. She just didn't give a shit. She's like, "No, you're watching this. This is good. You'll like it." And she was right. Absolutely loved the film. And eventually, I bought it. I don't remember how I got Time Bandits, but somehow I got a copy of Time Bandits, and I still have it. It's a fantastic film. I urge anyone who has not seen it to watch it. And because I have the nostalgic part of it, for that part, I would give it 5 stars. Because I have a fond memory of it, and I've continued to rewatch it again for nostalgic reasons, and because it's a great film. As a film by itself, I'd give it 4 stars. Because it's certainly it's not a classic, but it's a classic to me. I can understand why some people don't like it. But at the same time, when they say, "Oh, I really didn't like it," I'd be like, "You're out of your fucking mind. It's an amazing film." So, one thing I would have liked to have seen differently is there are some pacing issues. But look, bear in mind, I love the film. But I can understand some people being like, "Oh, it's slow a little bit at some points." But I don't really agree with it. So some people might say that. So I'm just going to end the video because I really have nothing negative to say about it. To me, it's just a really good film, and I will continue to watch it again and again and again. I'm looking for the day where I can eventually show it to my nephews. I can show it to, eventually, in the future, my kids. And I will continue to, recommend it to everyone. So please watch it, like it, enjoy it. Give me your feedback if you liked it. And as well as feedback, give me feedback on this. Again, I apologize for the shades, just needed. I'm just grateful I have prescription. It took me about 20 years to get prescription sunglasses for migraines, and finally got them. And now I'm wearing them a whole lot more than I really want to. But at least I look cool, right? So, please like, please subscribe, please comment and share. Love you all to death. Take care, guys. Bye.